This is the screencast for Lesson 28 of Stephen's C# 24-hour trainer. This lesson talks about generics, and in this example I'm going to show you how to make a static generic method. So I've already built a program here. It has a small user interface. Let me show you that user interface real quickly. It just has a text box here where you can enter some values. I put some default values in here that are already sorted so you can see what happens when they get randomized. A randomize button, and then here's a text box that displays the results. Here's the code that does the randomization. It gets the lines out of the text box using the text box's lines property and saves that in an array of string. It then calls the array methods.randomize method, which we're going to write in just a second. To randomize the items, that returns another array of string, and then we concatenate the result with character return line feeds and display them in the text box. So this part of the code is pretty straightforward. So now let's build this randomize method. We'll go to the view class, we'll go to the project menu, pick add class, and I'm going to call this class array methods. The idea is this class could hold a bunch of different methods for manipulating arrays. And then in here we're going to create this new method. Now by calling it a static method, that means that the calling code does not have to create an instance of the array methods class to use the method. If we go back here for a second, you can see how it just calls array methods.randomize. It hasn't actually created an instance of array methods with the new keyword and then called that object's randomize method. So for a method like this, that's pretty handy. So we're going to make this a public static method. The return type is going to be an array of whatever it is that we're dealing with. We're going to call our generic type variable t. So there's the return type. It's an array of t. The method's name is randomize. It takes as a generic type parameter one type, which we're going to call t. It takes as an input an array of t. And that's it. So there's our message signature. It's complaining because it doesn't return a value yet. Now what we need to do is use that code that I included in the instructions to try to make this thing do whatever it needs to do. And rather than wasting your time by typing it, I'm just going to grab it here and paste it in. Let's see, and I think I pasted a little too much. Let me get rid of that. This is the same as what I just typed, except in the copy and pasted version I called this items instead of values. So here's our method, and I won't go into great detail on about how it works, but I'll give you a quick overview. The code creates a random object. You can use a random object to generate random numbers. It then makes a copy of the input array so it doesn't mess up the original array. That way the main program, if it's got an array of employees or strings or whatever, this method isn't going to mess it up and change the order of the original array. That's generally a good practice, to not mess up the inputs unless you make it really clear that that's the whole point. Now for each position in the new array, for I equals 0 to items.length minus 1, we're going to stop before that, so we're actually going to only pick items up to the second to the last spot. We use the random object to pick a new position between this position, I, and the end of the array. Items.length will return the length, the index of the last item plus 1, because remember that the items array starts with index 0, but the next method picks a number between between this lower bound, including that lower bound, and this upper bound, not including the upper bound. So what this is doing is it's picking an item between the spot we're looking at and the last item in the array. And then this code just swaps those two items around. It takes the item in position J, puts it in position I, and then just to put item in position I somewhere, it puts that out in position J so we don't lose it, and later on it'll get swapped into position. When this thing finishes, all of the items have been swapped into position. The reason we don't need to look at this very last item at items.length minus 1 is we've already swapped items there. If we were to look at this one again, we would just wind up swapping it with itself. And then when we're done, we return to this new randomized items array that we created. So let's run the program. I click randomize, and there's our randomized list. If you take a look at it, you'll see that they're no longer in alphabetical order. So the real focus on this lesson, the real trick was figuring out what this signature was supposed to be. Public static means it's public and it's shared, so you don't have to create an instance of the array methods class. The return type is an array of our type parameter. There's the method name. There's the type parameter. It says we're going to be using this type T, and then here's our input parameter, an array of type T.